All discussions and interactions are meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. They're not intended to breach the ATA Code of Conduct, single out any student or educator, or diminish professional integrity in any way. I'm Conrad Drover. Join me as I sit down with inspiring professionals from diverse fields to gain valuable insight from their experiences and knowledge to help me grow as both an educator in the classroom and as a person in all areas of my life. This is Professional Development. Hi everyone. Today I'm joined by Neil Sandham, a veteran educator with over 30 years of experience. He's taught everything from shop to science to forensic science and other options. In this episode, Neil shares his fascinating journey, how he got an English degree but ended up teaching science. He reflects on how education has evolved and how students have not changed that much. We talk about the lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on teaching and learning, the ongoing teacher shortage in Alberta, and how both parents and teachers can work together to better support students. Neil offers thoughtful insight into the real challenges facing educators today, from knowledge gaps to technological change, and the critical importance of adapting and meeting students where they are. We also take a fun little detour into space exploration, including updates on the Artemis missions and how space tech is shaping innovation on Earth. Whether you're an educator, a parent, or a space nerd, or just curious about all things school and society, this conversation is packed with wisdom, humor, and heart. When we went to the Banff and Lake Louise, I was like, oh, good, like such a surprise. And I was like, oh, let's go to like Lake Louise and like take photos for my parents.
Boy, yeah.
So I had like my tripod set up and everything like that. It's like, oh, this is great. I was like, hey, like look like stoically out at the mountains or whatever while I go set this up or whatever.
Yeah,
And I'm like trying to pull out the ring from like, yeah. And then like as I'm walking towards her, she turns around. She's like, what's taking you so long? I'm like, hello. And then like that's how it happened.
Yeah.
And she takes off her glove to like me put on the ring. And all her other rings are gone. And she's like, oh, I put them all in the other hand today. I was like, oh, okay. Dang it. It's like, surprise. It's like the most obvious thing ever. Like she was totally ready for it, but that was cool.
So, like, just for future reference, they are always smarter than us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We did like a reverse vacation where we went to Fort McMurray.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then her parents from Newfoundland were up there visiting her sister. And so we popped by, flashed the bling, stuff like that. Yeah. It was cool. It was awesome. So now a whole nother can of worms of planning that has to go into this.
Yep.
Yeah. But, I found a hack to save money on a ring. Donate plasma twice a week for 6 months and you get a big discount. Yeah, I kind of have like a track mark here, but yeah, man, the ladies at the plasma center, they know me by name now. They're like, oh, Mr. Drover. Yeah, I was like, hello. So that's been my experience for the last couple months. So it's good. So okay, I start the podcast usually by going like the name, right?
Yep.
I'm always self-conscious of how do I say your last name. Sandham.
Sandham.
Sandham. Okay.
Yeah. Like when you make s'mores, you don't use Graham crackers, you use graham crackers.
Okay. Yeah. So Neil Sandham.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I think I've like mispronounced it like 50 different ways.
It doesn't matter. Everybody calls me Sandham anyways.
Sandham. Okay.
Yeah.
Sandham. Neil Sandham. Thanks for coming all the way to Crossfield. The big hike. Yeah. It's better than moving all this everywhere because I did that on the Teachers Convention week. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I had Jessica O'Connell on. She's a 5,000 meter Olympian. And
I saw that episode.
Oh, wow. There you go. You saw a clip. It's not out yet. Yeah, that's not out yet. March 3rd, Monday, is when the 2 episode premiere happens.
Nice.
So that's sweet. But yeah, like maybe if you just want to like reintroduce yourself to me, like I guess to everyone, and just where your education career is at right now, sort of where you started, how you got to here. It doesn't have to be a huge long thing. We can dive into that later, but
sure.
Just general a catch up.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. So my name is Neil Sandham. I currently teach science at W.H. Cruxford High School in Airdrie. This is my 32nd year of teaching. I taught 25 years of middle school and you can barely notice the twitch. I guess this is probably my 10th or so year of high school. For 5 years, I taught at the outreach school. So I taught grades 7 through 12, science and bits and pieces of math and things like that. I've taught science for 30 years. I was a middle school shop teacher for 14 years, and I taught outdoor ed, wildlife, and hunter education for probably about 8 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So, oh, and I have an English degree.
I didn't know that of you. But, like, where did you go to school?
Yeah, I went to University of Calgary.
University of Calgary, and you got an
Yep.
English degree, and then you're a science and shops teacher.
Yep. I started out my first year and a half of university. My major was astrophysics. So the astronomy I got, the physics I got, the calculus, not so much. So, which some of my colleagues since have said that that's just because I didn't have the right calculus teacher when I was in high school. But I I don't credit other people for my actions or inactions. Um, so yeah, so it was funny. I got an English degree, and then when I started teaching with Rocky View in 1992, that's back in the 1900s, kiddies.
It's 1 year before I was born.
Oh,
I know, right in the gut.
oh, oh. Um, yeah, they weren't hiring English teachers.
Mhm.
So in my second year, I was subbing, and a principal said, "Hey, Neil, can you teach science?" Yeah, I can teach science. Well, I can teach the heck out of science. He said, "Great. Here's a stack of textbooks. You start Monday."
Oh no.
But again, like I was always interested in science. I had a year and a half of science at university level. Um, and you really can. I know HR doesn't like to hear this, but in Alberta, you have a teaching degree. You don't have a high school degree. You don't have a middle school degree. You don't have an elementary school degree. You just have a teaching certificate. You really can teach any subject, any grade.
So I would have never guessed that 100% because when I came to the school, like we originally worked together a couple, I guess like a year and a half now back.
Right.
And when I walked into that like science department, I felt like a caveman. And I literally mentioned this before to other people that like, I was like, man, like these guys actually know science, you know? I just good with computers and like kind of like it, like, you know? So I would never guess that you had an English degree. And that's that's funny. I guess some people don't know that. Like I think I've like people don't know that you just get a teaching degree. It really doesn't matter like what subjects you teach in. Like they'll place you anywhere. And because in Manitoba it's the same.
Oh, okay.
It is the same. So I didn't know that there's any other way.
Yeah.
And
I believe in Ontario. Ontario also has different teachers unions. Like there's an elementary teachers association and like that. Yeah. Of course, in Alberta, all teachers and administrators are all the same association. So I believe in Ontario, you specialize in like primary or secondary or something like that.
yeah. So what I would think if I was like someone that looked at like the structure of the school system, like the Alberta education or Ontario education, I would find that having restrictions on people based on like their degrees, like middle school, elementary, like primary, whatever, would worsen a teacher shortage if there was one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I guess are we still in a teacher shortage right now? Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, in Alberta, there was a teacher shortage when I started in 1992.
And there still is?
And there still is. It's just worse.
There hasn't been like a hills and valleys type thing about it?
Nope. Just mostly one continual slide down.
Oof.
Yep.
So if they did implement that, like, oh, like I got my secondary education or like high school, that would definitely make things a lot worse, would it not?
I don't know. Because in my experience, someone who really loves teaching Div 1, grades 1, 2, and 3, isn't that interested in teaching grades 10, 11, and 12.
Right.
You know?
There might be like I guess there's more overlap with middle school and high school
Yeah, I think so.
because like I don't know what happens in an elementary school. I've never taught there. They just come to me in like grade 7. Well, grade 6 here because my school is like grade 6 to 12, which is interesting. But aside from that, like they just like spawn in my classroom in grade 7 or whatever, and I'm like, okay, what do you know? Teach me because I'm not sure. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it might mix up the high school, middle school, like I guess conundrum, but that's an interesting thing. Because yeah, Manitoba and Alberta are the same with that it's just teach whatever.
Yeah.
And like get thrown in. But my first principal when I worked in Fort Mac, and I'm not gonna shout out his name because I shout it out all the time and he probably gets annoyed. It's like, oh my God, this guy keeps talking about me. But when I first walked in there, May 1st after graduating April 25th,
Right. Yeah.
right? Um, I was green, like 100%.
Yeah.
And basically he said, don't worry, we're going to make you a good teacher. Right. That wasn't a threat. It wasn't a threat.
Okay.
It was like, he's like, don't worry, like we'll get you to where you need to
Right.
go. Right. We'll have the resources or whatever. And, like I thought I was super lucky that I had an EA in every one of my classes that first year,
Yeah.
but I feel like they're like, he needs one, like,
Well,
push him one, like, like we'll move some things over. We'll get him help.
but what a great way to support a young teacher as well.
Yeah. No,
If you're able to do that.
it was awesome. Like, I don't know. That's just like conspiracy theories now that the EA is coming in there. But the culture was we're going to make great teachers, right?
Sure.
And that was cool. But your range that you had in the past, sorry, how many years in total? Because I was breaking it down from 14 years in shop and then
32.
32 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So since 1992, that adds
Yep.
up because I'm 31. Right. Okay. I keep hitting you with that.
Oh.
So you're in an interesting like situation where now you can look at like how students act now and how they've act like back, I guess, when I was a student.
Mhm.
So think about like there's always things, right? There's always like fads and everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like Mr. Beast now, I guess. And then there's like probably remember like the Dragon Ball Z era. Like every like kid loved that back in the day.
Yep.
Just like a rundown, like how have kids changed, but also how have they stayed the exact same?
Yeah. So all of this is, in my humble opinion,
Yeah,
I am
anecdotal. Yeah.
right. Kids haven't changed.
No.
Kids are the same as they've always been. Nowadays it's cell phones and texting and Snapchat. But in the 90s, it was kids were passing notes. They were skipping class to go in and talk in the bathroom, hang out in the bathroom. Now they can hang out with their friends online, and half the time when I catch kids on their phones, they're not necessarily texting anything inappropriate. They're playing Uno online with their buddies in another classroom.
Oh yeah.
Well, I guess numeracy skills. I don't know, but I don't think kids really have changed that much, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, kids are kids. After 32 years of teaching, I still believe most kids are good people. They're like the rest of us. They're just people trying to figure out their place in the world, but they have less experience at it than we do.
Mm-hmm.
We have more of a framework to view the world through. They're still building theirs. And it's appropriate for kids to mess up. That's their job. Mess up when you're young, learn the lesson, so you don't do it when you're older and get arrested for stuff.
There you go.
Hypothetically speaking.
Wise wisdom. It's funny you said the Uno thing. So I was teaching grade 8 math last year, and there's this game, like it's like dice.
Mhm.
Like you have to get to 10,000. I don't know if you like ever played that game, but there's like an online version of it. It's called Frackle, I think it's called.
Okay.
And I showed my kids that because they can add up. Like if you get 5s, that's 50. So if they get 2 5s, it's 100. And it was really good at them just quickly doing mental math, right? Sure. So I gave them this online form because I was just sick and tired of hearing dice roll like all day. And you could like challenge someone. Like you could have a new a temporary username and challenge someone. So like they were playing against each other. But the social studies teacher like knocked on my door, like when I was teaching the afternoon science sevens, because I teach morning and after science 8, I teach morning and afternoon.
Right.
So my morning class was playing with my afternoon class, and like I had to like walk a couple days in a row. I'd like walk into the social studies class, but guys, you got to get off this. Like miss, they're not paying attention. Like I know it because I see their usernames right now. Because one just challenged me to a game. So yeah, like the kids don't change, but I guess they have different tools to their like disposal, right?
Yeah.
And I find like sometimes it either amplifies their ability to screw up or like diminishes it. Because I always think like, yeah, like I see myself in a lot of these grade 7, grade 8 kids that I work with. Like I'm like, oh, I was that guy. Like, pretty much. The only thing I was like, I think about it and like, I love tech.
Yeah.
And like I do, like I'm such a nerd with it. But I also have like a thought experiment is like, what if I grew up with an iPad?
Right.
Right. I don't know how that would change my perspective on everything, like on anything really. Like, would I be as creative as I am now, or would I be as interested in like troubleshooting stuff? Because a lot of times, like Apple is great at that, where it just makes it easy,
Yeah.
right? But I had like, I know you're gonna think it's like high tech because you're from like the 70s or something, right? But I had like Windows XP and Windows 98 initially, and nothing worked out of the box.
Yeah.
Man, I had to like install a driver and like stuff. And I did that when I was like 8 years old. I learned how to like install like a driver for a graphics card so I could play Jumpstart 4th grade or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I find like if I didn't have that experience of like growing up as tech evolved, that I may not be where I'm at now. So the only thing I am curious with is like, yes, the kids are the same, but their environment is different. And I'm just wondering, do you think like, what is your opinion on that? And do you think like it's gonna sort of mold them differently than than the last generation?
Um, yes, I think it's going to mold them differently than the last generation, but I think that's important for human development. Yeah, as you were thinking, how would my life be different if I grew up with an iPad? I was thinking, how would your life be different if you grew up with a cassette recorder?
Oh yeah.
Where you still have to, when computer first came out, we used to program things on cassette tapes. The science behind that, it's, magnets and metallic tapes and things like that, right? But the first computers, we used to program on cassette tapes. And we would, for fun, we would program our own calculator or an RPG. That's very text-based, but it was still, this was the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, first edition, right? And so you're still learning those skills. And at the time, that was high tech. It was not high tech. The funny thing is, though, this is way off topic. The computers back then had very little memory. Just like now, Chromebooks have very little memory because it's all cloud storage, right? Back then, there was very little memory, but it was all stored on first cassette tapes and then on floppy disks and then on smaller disks and then became more as technology evolved, as memory became cheaper. There was more and more onboard memory, and we're into megabytes and then gigabytes, and now a terabyte hard drive is nothing. $40, $50, you can get an external terabyte hard drive, and even 1 terabyte is antiquated, right?
Yeah.
Whereas 1 terabyte could store decades worth of information from back in the day.
I can barely hold like a project file for one of these podcasts with a terabyte.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a 2 terabyte drive there, and I'm always freaking out at how much space I have left.
And I think that speaks to me, the importance of education, but not just education in schools, that it's important to always learn and always evolve and always adapt. And in my career, 32 years of teaching kiddies, it's so I just lost all validity. You can edit that part out, but
we're amplifying it, zoomed in. That's the sound bite. That's the real. That's viral reel. When were you born again? I was born in the 1900s.
But as a teacher as well, that I've had to evolve, I've had to adapt, I've had to change. And to me, in the same way that the basics of kids hasn't changed, the basics of teaching hasn't changed, but the details of it have changed so much and modified so much. I started out teaching with Gestetner, right? Like the photocopiers were basic. There was no such thing as scanners. Every school had a fax machine. Things like exactly, yeah. And did you know the only two places in the province that still use fax machines are education and healthcare?
Yeah, I got well, not even here. We don't have a fax machine in this building, and I found that out because I was trying to get health records from British Columbia, and they're like, "You know what? We can mail it to you, but there's a strike going,
Yeah.
or guess what? We can fax it to you." And I'm like, "Sweet." I ran to the office. I was like, "What's the fax number?" And they're like, "We don't have a fax."
No.
I was like, never mind. I'll go get the vaccine again. Like,
Right.
guess.
So you go online, and of course, there's like everything else. There's where you can get 3 free faxes, or you can send 3 free faxes. So I get requests from a student, hey, I'm trying to get into UBC Victoria. Can you send in a reference? Okay, sure. Well, you have to fax the reference to Victoria. Same thing. I went to our school of tech, and I went, hey, Sarah, so how do I use the fax function in the scanner? And she, same thing as you. She went, fax? All the photocopiers have a fax function, but they didn't hook up the line because it takes its own separate data line. So, yeah, anyways. The rambling point being, you have to adapt and you have to change. Kids have to adapt and change, whether they're adapting to this new tape recorder or this new CD or this new MP3, and teachers have to do the same thing, whether we're adapting from back in the days, these things called textbooks, which were antiquated the moment that they were printed.
Yeah.
They were so out of date. Or even now, so I'm integrating AI into my practice. I'm an old fart. And I have a hard time remembering that, but I'm in my mid to late 50s. I've been doing this longer than some of my colleagues have been alive. But you have to keep up with things because that's where your clients are. You said it yourself when we started talking. You said the grade 7s come to you and you're like, okay, show me what you know so I know where to go from there. That's the essence of good teaching. Find where your students are, meet them where they're at, take them from there. That's our job. It's not our job to say, you're in my Science 30 class, you should know how to do this by now. That's not helpful. That builds walls up between you and the kids. You're not supposed to build the walls. You're supposed to smash right through them, right? So when you find out that the kids don't know how to do this, here's an example. From my Science 30 class, some of the students didn't know how to use scientific notation on their calculator. So in the Science 30 curriculum, the unit we're doing right now is physics. I love physics. We were calculating the gravitational field strength of planets. Okay. It's literally just, here's a formula, put in the numbers, push the buttons, what do you get? Do you understand why you're pushing the buttons? Do you understand what buttons to push? And they didn't know how to use scientific notation on their calculator. And so they weren't getting the right answers, but they were too scared to admit that because they felt like, oh, I'm too stupid. I guess I don't belong there. No, it's not your failing as a student if you don't know how to do something. It's my failing as a teacher for not realizing that and then addressing that. Mm-hmm. And once I realized that, I felt so bad.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I'm going, what is wrong with these kids? This is grade 8 science. They don't know how to do this. But once I got over my own ego, I realized, oh, man. And as soon as the kids, you show them how to do it, they practice it a couple of times, and they go, oh, Sandham, I got this right. Yeah, you did. And the difference that makes because we're adapting, because we're changing, and because we're listening to our clients, the students.
That's a good perspective to have. Like, I know I'm did you have that like animosity of like, oh, you should have known this? Is that something that was just in your early career, or does it creep back every once in a while, or have you sort of just grown out of that, like being, I guess, frustrated that the kids don't know what they on paper should have known the previous year?
Um, I think it's always there as a teacher, and I feel like it's been worse the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay, so it's not something you like grew out of, but like you maybe intellectually know that
Mhm.
like it's not their fault or stuff like that, but it's like human beings, right? You get sort of frustrated. So it has came back recently, like just
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Um, words. Um, yes, I do have a feeling like it's maybe gotten worse in the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm not going to say that it happened because of COVID. I mean, we're in Alberta, so we
Yes.
know COVID was a hoax. You can edit that part out too if you want. Um, I don't necessarily think it has much to do with that. There's some evidence out there about long-term effects of long COVID, especially in adolescents during those developmental stages, mild hypoxia caused by the pneumonia-like side effects of respiratory disease, lack of oxygen to the brain essentially affects the development through those crucial adolescent years. I don't know that there's a lot of hard data regarding that. But anecdotally, um, yeah, I do feel like to a large extent, things that students, no, things that I feel students should know by grade 11 or 12, they don't know. Is it because they missed it? 5 years ago, there were schools in our division who didn't teach science. They just did literacy, numeracy, and that was it.
Like titrating or triaging education.
Yeah, literally. It
Nice.
was middle school, and they were just trying to encourage kids to do reading, writing, and some math. At the same time, I was a teacher still doing full online lessons to blank screens or pictures of everybody's cat's butt walking in front of the camera. Or the one thing that I miss about that time is being able to see all the kids' pets.
Yeah.
Not the kids' pets' butts, but getting to see the kids' pets.
So you kind of get a view of their life,
Yeah.
right, outside of school, and that's interesting. And like, yeah, like the pandemic had like physical effects on students, but I think it's like more of the routine, the structure of school, like
Yeah.
like just like, and especially in like there's probably like crucial years where it's like, oh, like if you were in the pandemic when you were grade 4 to 6 or something like that, that might have an impact on you greater than someone that was in the pandemic 9 to 12 or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Um, but I do get like there's an urge like out of frustration of being a teacher, like, oh, you should know this. Like, why don't you know this? And then like your logical mind sort of like kicks back in, right? And then you go, I understand it. It's still frustrating.
Yeah.
Right. So outside the classroom, I know we do a lot of professional development and stuff like that. Well, we don't, not a lot compared to a lot of other divisions that I've looked at, but we have PD days, right?
Right.
Um, so there are frustrations that probably should be addressed somehow. But again, it's not raging at the kids for it.
No.
It's maybe talking to your colleagues and like figuring out like systematic approaches to being like,
Yes.
well, every kid that I have in grade 8 math doesn't know how to square a number or something like that. Um, right now, there's nothing we can argue about that would fix that for this current grade 8 stuff.
Right.
But how are we going to fix it for the next group that comes in, right?
Yeah.
So, do you have any like ideas on that? Like, what would be the best approach to combat that situation?
Again, the challenge is it's our job to meet our students where they're at. So first to find out where they're at, then to realize, oh, they're struggling with this because they don't remember or didn't do square numbers and square roots.
Right.
Well, you need square numbers and square roots in order to do these functions in grade 9 math or math 15 or math 10C. So it's kind of our job to go back and reinforce or reteach those. Having said that, when you get to the high school level, there's so much curriculum there. The tendency and the temptation is to say, but we need to get through all of this stuff first. And I think that's a real important continuum. This is nothing new. This is nothing groundbreaking. In the early years of education, ECE, kindergarten, grade 1, students are learning those super important skills of being able to sit for a bit, being able to take turns, following instructions. Okay, circle time, come have a seat on the circle. And now kids are in high school. We go, okay, PBIS, we're doing circle time. All right, gather around a circle, folks, and we're going to take turns, and everybody's going to have their chance to give their opinion. Those are really important skills that were focused on in the early years. But now those early years teachers are having to focus on other skills as well, like here's how you tie your shoes.
Right.
My buddy Sharon, who teaches outside of Edson, or outside of Stony Plain, she has, I think, a grade 1-2 split. And there are some kids coming into grade 1 who aren't toilet trained yet.
Yeah.
They still need help going to the bathroom. Tell that story to a Bio 30 teacher and their faces go white. Like, what do I do with that? Thanks, I don't know. So I think the answer to your question, which was, what do I think is the solution? I don't think it's one thing or one teacher. Yeah. And I think it's communication between school and home. I'm a parent myself. We have 2 kids. Spoilers, just a second. Oh, background change. Oh, that was your sponsor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like you're a parent yourself. I guess my main thing was it's like, yes, we have a job to like, we got to meet them where we're at. And everyone knows that. And like, I guess in the summertime, I was like really frustrated with that. I was like, oh, like why these damn kids don't know math or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And then like, you talk to a bunch of other teachers and they basically like give you a smack upside the head. Like, no, this is your job. Like, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I get that. I guess my question was asking like, okay, that is our prerogative in the classroom.
Yep.
But outside the classroom, when we're discussing with other colleagues or when we have division office or whatever mystical people out there write the curriculums and whatnot, right. How are they addressing that? And like, what can we do outside the classroom as like a staff or like a governing body or anything like that to address that, because that is a lot of more workload on teachers than it was before. And every teacher, they're going to be in a bad mood, good mood, but at the end of the day, if they're worth their salt, they're going to be like, listen, we got to meet this kid where they're at.
Sure.
Right. It's exhausting. But that's just what we got to do. My question was, knowing that teachers will do that, what outside factors could be worked on to get that up and going?
That's where I was going with this, that I think the answer is it can't just be the schools. It has to include family. It has to include the parents at home. And if there's anybody out there watching this who isn't a teacher, I've just alienated myself from all of them. But as a parent myself, we knew that it wasn't just the school job to teach our kids math facts. It's our job. It's not just the school job to teach our kids language and grammar. It's our job as the parents. And it's not just the parents or just the teacher's job. I think one of the biggest problems is there has purposely been a massive wedge driven between home and schools. And there used to be a day when I would phone home to talk to a parent about Conrad's behavior in class, and the parent would say, happened at school. It's a school problem. You take care of it. I used to see that a lot. I don't get that very much anymore.
Conrad's parents would not say it's school problem. I'll do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, yep.
Yeah.
My parents would be, I would get home and mom would reach into the drawer for the wooden spoon and say, tell me why the school phoned. And dad would walk home from work.
How dare you embarrass me?
Right? Well, dad would walk in taking off his belt going, boy, tell me why the school phoned. I'm not saying that.
No, don't need that. But there was a sense of, I guess, cooperation and like, mutual respect between each of them, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess, and that brings me to another point, because you can extrapolate this, I think, because like, oh, there's trouble in the classroom, students are struggling, teachers are struggling, and then because they're not getting support from like, there's a lack of perceived support by like from the parents, let's say, or there's resources being like, just diffused too wide, right?
Sure.
Um, but then we can think about it like, I bet like the parents are having a more difficult time just living in this
Oh, yeah.
society today. So everyone's bags are full.
Yep.
Everyone is just, it's harder for everyone to do everything, right?
Yep.
So I it's like, oh, like man, I wish this person paid more attention to little Timmy or something like that, or helped him read. But then that it's not uncommon where a parent has two jobs or something like that.
Absolutely.
So the job of a parent is even harder than it's ever been.
Yep.
And which is cascading down to making it difficult for everyone, I guess, right?
I don't necessarily think it's a cause and effect thing. The job of a parent is as hard as it's ever been. The job of a teacher is as hard as it's ever been. Let's be honest, the job of a student is as hard as it's ever been as well. And I don't think one causes the other, but the fact that they happen means we all need to step up.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers need to work differently, if not harder. Parents need to work differently, if not harder. And absolutely, you've got to understand as a teacher, like you said, parents are struggling. The economy is not great. It's hard to make a living out there. And your kids maybe have soccer or ringette or ballet or all those extracurriculars, which we know are so important to child development. Imagine, for those of you who don't know, imagine if you grew up without having your passion for track events fostered,
Right.
without the training that you do. You ever had a week where you weren't able to work out or train? How did you feel after that week?
Oh, it sucks.
It's part of you. It's integrated into you. I don't have
That
that
problem? Pizza's integrated into me right now. Yes.
Right? I absolutely. It is harder than ever. Well, it's really hard to be a parent. It's really hard to be a teacher. And we do have to work together and not point fingers and say, it's a school's fault my kid isn't doing math.
It's the government's. When in doubt. Yeah.
There you go. It's a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I was trying to say in answer to your question. What we really need, it's not a solution of what PD should teachers be doing. I think the solution is what can parents and teachers do together to help bring the students up to those levels. Because in the end, it's going to be, the payoff is going to be, we put in this time now when the kids are younger. When they get older, they get better jobs. They can invent the new policies, the new technology, the new procedures. Ultimately, they're going to make the world a better place. And sooner or later, they're going to be caring for us in our old age. And if we've taught them those skills and if we've taught them the basic, the attitudes, the morals, that flexibility, the cognitive elasticity to continue learning and changing and keep up with things, it's going to make the kids more successful as adults. And I think that's going to have a better impact on our society as a whole.
Well said. Yeah, like I was gonna make a joke about like them getting me in a good seniors home and stuff like that, but you were on a roll and it was really good.
I was trying not to say, and eventually one of them is going to be changing my diaper.
There you go. And I want them to be good at it. So just rewinding back just a second there, you were talking about that there is I guess a divide or a fission right now between like the parents and teachers. And that's causing some of the stuff we just talked about and preventing some of the stuff that we want to happen, right? Like the
so.
investment. Why do you think that, or what's the reason for that division compared to when you were a kid, when there was an equal like understanding, like there's a mutual understanding between the parents and the teachers?
I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that question. Because I think I think that has to do with sociological factors. I think it has to do with the way that people view themselves and the world. Um, I was a kid going through schools in the 70s and the 80s. I was born in the 1960s. In the 1970s, it was very rare for parents to accept their kids, sorry, not paying attention in school, not being focused in school. I'm not talking about diagnoses or medications or undiagnosed learning needs that existed for decades, and we didn't start recognizing them as in education or as a society until probably even the 2000s, the late 2000s to the 20 teens. Is that right? Is that what you say?
20 teens,
I don't know.
2010s.
2010s?
Yeah, something like that. It works.
You know, honestly, I don't know if I can answer that question. I guess I just think now I'm going to sound really old. I'm starting to blame social media for a lot of things.
The TV. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. But I mean, having said that, I think social media can be a really powerful influence as well. But like everything, you have to be a critical consumer of media.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that media is the newspaper, whether it's podcasts, whether it's the reels that you watch. Literally everything that you put into your brain is like everything that you put into your body. If you eat, this is a fallacy of false equivalence, but if a person eats junk food and nothing but junk food, you're going to crave junk food. It's going to have an effect on your body. If the social media that you take in is nothing but backstabbing and snarling and cutting people down and insulting politicians or insulting teachers or insulting scientists, people start to believe what they're feeding their brain. This sounds like a really lame answer.
No,
but
I get it.
I feel like maybe that's where it's come from. And we have a lot of groups on social media. We have some groups in social media that really perpetuate a view that schools are terrible, they're biased, we're turning kids into homosexual, communist, dope smoking hoodlums. And I think back to when I was a kid in the 70s, and people said the same thing about rock and roll. Rock and roll is going to turn kids into dope smoking hoodlums.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach in my grade 9 science class back in the 1950s when the Russians launched Sputnik, the start of the space race, essentially. I love grade 9 science. I love space. But the reactions were something similar. People didn't understand what was happening, and so they were threatened by it, and they were worried and afraid of Sputnik. Sputnik was a metal ball about this big with a radio receiver on it that pinged about every, I think, 30 seconds. That's it. It lasted in orbit for a few months, and that was it. It didn't pose a threat in any way.
It was the 5G back in the day, sort of thing like that.
Kind of, yeah.
So, like, I'm gonna throw some thoughts out, and I wanted to see if that connects with what you're saying, and maybe I'll like open up your thought about it. But one thing I have sort of observed and maybe heard someone else say it and just sort of took it and then pretended it was my own thought. That's what social media does sometimes. Was that, a couple decades ago, even like back into like, let's say 2000s and the 90s, the sources of information were more or less like singular, right? There is like maybe the news channel, maybe there's 2 or 3 different news channels, and you listen to it, and everyone got their information from very similar things. And
the encyclopedia.
There you go. And now everyone, like, there's so much more information now, and it's disorganized.
Yeah.
And it's hard to figure out like what's correct, what's incorrect, or not even correct, just what's agreeable and what's disagreeable. Sure. What do we consider true? What do we consider false? And I feel like social media, like just technology, like Moore's law just happened. And kids, like, let's say like late millennials to like Gen Z, and now like, what is it, Gen Alpha? They just got like a tsunami of innovation that just happened, like with like information. And I feel like we're talking about like soft skills that we have to learn in school and stuff. I don't think we are 100% prepped to teach them how to sort that information yet. Like we have media literacy and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of the stuff now is just spread, like it's just so much, and like different avenues. People are getting information from various different places, that now your neighbor doesn't agree with you
Yeah.
about everything because his algorithm is different than your algorithm. Whereas before, you both watched the 5 o'clock news and we can argue about it like the same thing, but you may have different views on it.
Yeah.
But now you guys get totally different set of news, different set of facts. And is that something that you can like intertwine into like your previous answer? Like you're talking about the divide?
Well, yeah, I think once upon a time, I remember doing this. We used to teach students critical thinking skills and how to be critical consumers of media, how to spot those fallacies when they're coming up. And now we have, I'm trying not to get political here,
I know.
but now we have political leaders
Yep.
who absolutely spew fallacies and invalid information, not just slightly biased, but entirely falsified information. And people naively believe, well, a politician or an official couldn't say something if it wasn't true. But they've also been convinced that the fact that they've been convinced that the experts who actually do know about those things,
They're paid or whatever.
right, they're paid off by the big environmentalism. There's no such thing as big environmentalism. There's no money. There's money in oil and gas and coal. And I mean, those aren't inherently bad industries. But the people who are making a lot of money aren't getting bought off by environmental groups. There's no money in environmental groups. Anyways, sorry.
I get it. So like there's
Getting off topic.
There's a lot of things that just have increased the scope of everyone's information. I
Sure.
find like a lot of people just can't agree with things right now, and it's harder than ever for everyone. So the scapegoat is different for everyone.
Yes.
And like everyone's like, we need the priorities are different.
Sure.
Like it's so wide. There's so many priorities.
Yes.
You keep mentioning space, so I have to talk about space. What is the most recent update on the Artemis missions? Because I know last time we worked together, like they were just starting that, and it was a big deal. And I've been too bogged down by other news from private space companies and their CEOs that I haven't been really following like actual space news.
So, and the private space exploration companies are tied to this as well, because there's actually no such thing as a government space company anymore.
Okay.
NASA was privatized four presidents ago. It was started under George Bush Jr. Obama continued it. Trump continued it in his first presidency, and it was completed, I believe, sometime in Trump's first presidency in the early days of Biden's presidency. And I think that's important as well, because NASA used to be funded by the U.S. military. It's not anymore. But, sorry, your question was where the Artemis mission's at right now. So, of course, Artemis 1 already launched successfully. It flew out around the moon and came back again with famous mannequins on board to measure atmospheric conditions inside the Orion capsule, including radiation exposure and things like that. And it was entirely autonomous. The autonomous software is related to self-driving cars. That's where the software came from. So
like Tesla and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so when we debate is space exploration important or not, there's no question that we need to take care of our planet. We're not exploring space to go to another planet. That's not a possibility. Period. End of discussion. Humans cannot survive anywhere else in the universe except for our planet. Done. But the spirit of space exploration is a terrible phrase, but We're building the plane in the air. We don't have the ability to do that yet. So the ultimate purpose of Artemis is to get humans to Mars. Humans couldn't survive that trip right now. There's far too much radiation coming from our sun, from outside of the heliosphere, from other stars in the universe. There's far too much hostile radiation. And if they did survive the trip to Mars, Mars doesn't have the atmosphere that Earth has. Mars doesn't have the ozone layer that Earth has. Mars doesn't have the radiation protection. How are we going to protect colonists from that radiation? Well, the Martian regolith, we can't call the stuff on Mars soil, because soil is a combination of dead plants and insects, nitrogen-fixing bacteria, nitrifying bacteria, denitrifying bacteria. None of those bacteria exist on Mars. We can't import those bacteria because not only is it illegal under international law, but those bacteria could be the alien invaders that destroy any potential life that might be on Mars right now, right? So we don't have the capability to do it yet. But that's kind of the point to Artemis. So Artemis 2 has been delayed. It's been delayed for safety considerations because there are some problems with, if I remember correctly, fuel leaks in some of the tanks. The Orion crew module itself seems to be working. The safety features, the that ejector seat, but that same idea, in case there's a failure on launch, to eject the crew capsule for the safety of the crew so they can survive NASA's phrase is spontaneous unscheduled disassembly.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite phrases. An explosion, rocket go boom.
Let's go.
Yes. But the purpose to Artemis 2, and this one always disappoints my students, is we're going to take a crew of about 4 or 5 astronauts, including female astronauts, including a BIPOC astronaut, that's the appropriate phrase, including a Canadian astronaut, Jeremy Hansen. Talk about your DEI crews.
There you go.
This is a multifaceted crew, a European crew member. It's going to take them, it's going to take them to the moon, orbit around the moon, and come back again. They're not setting foot on the moon in Artemis 2. They're making sure it's safe for people to go back to the moon. They're going to focus on the south pole of the moon, where there's frozen water. Water is made from hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen is great for fuel cells, for generating electricity. Oxygen is great for rocket fuel, for breathing, obviously. So the Artemis missions, while ultimately the idea is to get humans to Mars, in the meantime, we need to develop new technologies. So Artemis 3, humans will get to the moon, and they'll build a base on the moon. Well, before they get there, there already has to be a habitat there set up. So we're sending autonomous vehicles up to 3D print the habitats on the moon. 3D printed habitats exist now on Earth. Emergency organizations can fly these into areas devastated by hurricanes, by tidal waves, by natural disasters, and they can quickly set up a 3D print habitats for people just using the local material, the local soil and rocks, mixes it with kind of a cementing compound and some water, and it's literally what it sounds like. A big 3D printer on a boom arm, and it just, goes around. You can see, I get my students to look these things up. You can see videos of it on YouTube. You can go on the Google machine. The exciting thing about this is they're going to test this with Artemis 3. Can we make human habitats this way on the moon? The reason why that's so important is because they can be set up ahead of time, be filled with Earth's atmosphere. So the astronauts land on the moon, can literally walk from the lunar vehicle into the habitat, take off their suits, and be able to survive in that environment. If it works on the moon, it'll work on Mars. We can send these autonomous vehicles to Mars to build these habitats using the Martian regolith to fill it with an atmosphere that humans can breathe, can survive. And the Martian regolith has, we believe, enough protection to protect humans from the dangerous radiation that Mars is exposed to.
Wow. So Thanks for the update. No, that's awesome.
And they've planned up to Artemis 14, by the way.
Okay.
So we already have Artemis 1 through 5 or 6 with clear objectives. Theoretically, there's Artemis 7 through 14 planned as well.
See, I love that. I do. And I like, it sucks that I like
Nerd.
I'm not as informed with as I want to be, but I really like that there's a lot of planning, a lot of engineering going on. And the way I look at it is that I said, well, yeah, we can't live on Mars, whatever. It's space exploration, but we can't live on Mars. Space exploration is probably going to stop, in terms of living, like colonizing Mars, right? Probably not going to happen. And if it does, like, it's very short term because we got to get the resources and get them back there or something like that. But the technologies that are being made to do this, right? The one thing I'm thinking of is like the self-sustaining aspect of like a space station or like traveling long distances. If we can recycle water and oxygen and everything like that in space, then those technologies, why can't we do them on Earth?
Right.
Right? So I find, and I tell this to Olivia all the time, who gets annoyed by like, why are we going to space? We have problems here on Earth.
True.
I'm always like, well, like we're developing really cool things that can help life on Earth. Like, and the number one thing I think about, and maybe you have a more, like, I guess, knowledgeable perspective on this, but it's just the way we handle resources in space is a good lesson for how we can handle resources on Earth. Like our way we recycle stuff, our the methods we develop to utilize the limited resources we have on a space station or Mars or the moon or whatever. Why can't we do that on Earth?
Right.
Right.
And I agree with you, and I think that is one of the advantages of space exploration. It kind of comes down to a sales pitch as well. Which is the easier sales pitch for investors? We're going to develop technology that can easily clean water so that more people in Australia or in central Alberta can get clean drinking water. Or you're going to invest in technology that you can say went up on the International Space Station to filter out the water so that we can have clean drinking water for astronauts. Which is more sexy?
Right.
The space exploration. But the application of that is we have a horrible landslide in Pakistan. People are dying. Infrastructure is damaged. Water is polluted. Sewage lines have ruptured. It's running into the groundwater. People are drinking what they can from dirty, contaminated water. What if we could fly in drones with this technology, which can be powered by solar power or by hand pump or a bicycle crank, which can filter out that dirty water, get rid of it, turn it into clean, potable water for people in that disaster area? We do that. That exists. That came from space exploration.
So awesome.
Right? One of my favorite stories, it's a little less humanitarian, but astronauts are on the International Space Station. Things break all the time. You can't wait 6 weeks for the next delivery to send spare parts up. What do? 3D print them.
Yeah.
Duh. What do we do when we need parts? 3D print them. They upload the software. They've got high-speed internet on the ISS. They're closer to the satellites than we are.
I guess so, yeah.
They download the patterns. They print them off. They 3D print the parts. A medical doctor, I forget her name, it's terrible of me. She was attached to some of the space shuttle and some of the ISS missions. One of the biggest problems with astronauts on the ISS is they keep breaking and spraining their thumbs and their fingers and their wrists because they think they're floating around weightless. Law of conservation of mass. You're not weightless. Momentum is still a thing. As you feel you're slowly floating towards that metal wall and you put your hand out to stop yourself, have you ever tried doing a one-hand handstand suddenly? I don't know about you, but I'm 92 kilograms. If I tried to spontaneously do a one-hand handstand, that's going to hurt. So that's one of the most common injuries on the space station. Although everybody has some medical training, you can't have that kind of first aid kit. This doctor realized, 3D print a splint. And so she updated the software, the 3D printed a splint, put it on. She talked the astronauts through using video uplink. Application, she finishes her tenure with the space program. She developed emergency kits, which are about the size of a suitcase. They include a 3D printer. They include a satellite uplink. They include medical supplies that can be flown into disaster areas. Again, nowadays by drones, it can be lowered into the area where a local nurse, a local first aider, a local first responder can connect with a surgeon from Johns Hopkins Hospital in the East Coast of the United States, and they can talk that person through a life-saving surgery to save someone's life thousands of kilometers away in the other part of the world where there's no medical staff around.
Wow. Like we always bug about technology and like the social media and stuff like that, but when you put it like the engineers and people that, again, I think the International Space Station, being an astronaut in general, is the quintessential apex of being a problem solver. Like, I think that's what they need there, right? It's like you have to be able to solve a problem. Like you have to be knowledgeable, but you have to apply it. And I think like I hate to say the word trickle down because then people get into like economics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But technology trickles down, right? And it gets into this stuff. And yeah, it's just one of the, I guess, the benefits of, going somewhere that's scary and uninhabitable is like you have to problem solve and you have to make this stuff. And it's almost like, the mythos story of, coming back from like the big adventure and being like, this is what I have now. And like, I'm sharing it with all you guys.
Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah.
The Iliad.
There has to be like someone that ventures out, right, to the final frontier or whatever, and comes back and has some wisdom that makes life easier. And I think we've done that throughout history, right? And now we're just doing it, up in the stars.
Right.
This is going to be awesome. So, man, I could pick your brain all day on that, but I think we got to move on. Well, that was part 1 of my conversation with Neil Sandham. Stay tuned next week for part 2, where we talk about forensic science and we really get dorky with superhero trivia. Anyway, that's all for this week. Subscribe and have a great one.